Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Welcome to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex, and we have an interesting show today. I'm going to be joined later in the show by other Infowars staff. We're going to have Paul Joseph Watson calling in from England Live, where you got Anthony Gucciardi will be here in the studio, as well as Jakari Jackson. And we're going to have an interview later on in the show with Bill Still. Now, he's a filmmaker, a documentarian. He made a film that we carry here at Infowars, Jekyll Island, and we're going to talk to him about the history of the Fed. You know, it's coming up to 100 years that they've been doing what they do to us, and we're going to talk about what they do to us. We're going to talk also about it actually goes much longer than 100 years, this kind of oppression from central banks, what he talks about in his documentary. It's a wonderful documentary. I've seen the entire thing, and it's anybody that loves history, anybody that's interested in money, anybody that wants to understand what's going on in this country needs to see this documentary. We're going to talk to him about the history of money as well as the future of money, and that's going to be coming up later on in the show. So we also want to take some of your calls. We're going to be talking to, as I said, Anthony Gucciardi and Paul Joseph Watson, and we're going to take some of your calls and get some of your comments about special reports they've got coming our way. Now, we just had an election. We had, actually, in Texas, we just had our first racist election. That's right. We used voter IDs, actually photo voter IDs. Can you imagine that? We actually required people to look at it. And the interesting thing is that we actually had about twice as many voters in Texas, even though that was supposed to suppress turnout. It actually didn't suppress turnout. We had a lot of voters in Texas show up. But, you know, showing a photo ID, that's not really a racist thing, is it? Is that really a racist thing? The same laws that the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, is coming after Texas as well as North Carolina because they're requiring photo ID. And yet they allow it in Indiana, and many other states have exactly the same laws. But they're coming after Texas and North Carolina. Why? Well, they say that because these states are in the South, because they're part of the old Confederacy, that therefore these laws must be racist laws. It's absolute nonsense. I can tell you, coming from North Carolina, I had a friend of my brother-in-law's tell him that he went to vote. And, of course, in North Carolina, you would, in the past, just show up and give them a name and an address, and they'd look it up. Well, anybody can look up a name and address in a phone book, so you can basically go in and vote the phone book. And they give you plenty of time to do it, too. It's not just one election day, of course. That was another reform that we got, was extending the election periods, not just absentee ballots, but you have a very long election period. So a dishonest person can go in and vote often and vote early, as they say. Well, my friend went in to vote, and he gave them his name and address, and they said, you've already voted today. He said, no, they can't be. Oh, no, you voted, and your, I think it was mother, voted. She was at the same address, and she had deceased. So, you know, both he and his dead mother had already voted that day. Now, did he turn that in as a voter fraud complaint? No. He didn't have the time to bother with it. He didn't want to come on the show and talk about it. That happens, though. But people don't want to take time out of their life to pursue this. And so what we hear from the Board of Elections is, well, it's not really a problem because it isn't happening. It is happening. It's very easy to happen. It's not an oppressive thing to have voter ID. As a matter of fact, here in Texas, you got 7 choices of photo ID, things like a driver's license, a military ID, or a passport. It's not an oppressive or racist thing to require an ID, a picture ID. A lot of places require that just to cash a check or to do a transaction in a retail place. But we've also got other election results that are coming in. You know, I like to call these unelection results because in an election, you get to make a choice, but not in the unelection. And we're going to talk about that right after the break. We'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about with an unelection result. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex, and I love that bumper. If you haven't seen that, you need to take a look at that on video. They did a great job of a retro bumper there, as well as Alex kind of going into this Pokemon thing that he does there, but not in real life. So we were just talking before the break about how we just had our first racist election here in Texas. That's right. We had voter ID, photo IDs, like you have to show when you're cashing a check in most places. And everybody said that's going to suppress voter turnout, and yet we had a twofold increase in voter turnout. Didn't happen. And these are the same laws that many other states have. Indiana, several states in the Northeast have enacted photo ID laws. And yet in Texas and in North Carolina, Attorney General Eric Holder is coming after those state laws, accusing them of being racist. And that simply isn't the case. As I mentioned before the break, I know personally of someone who went to vote in North Carolina when there were no voter ID laws and was told that he had already voted along with a dead relative that lived at the same address. But, you know, I think the real story here is the unelection that is going on. And we're getting returns from the unelection every day. Just a couple of days ago, we learned that 900,000 people in California were unelected from their health care plan. They didn't get a choice in that. Well, now we find out that in Colorado, 250,000 people have been canceled from their health care plans. That's kind of the unelection, isn't it? You know, you were told that you could keep your health care plan. You had picked out what you wanted to do. Can't you make a decision about your own life? You know, we're supposed to be able to make decisions to elect people to rule over us like kings and tyrants, but we can't be allowed to make decisions about what our health care is going to be, evidently, according to Obama. That's not really going too well. He got skewered pretty well at the Country Music Awards last night. They had a couple of country and western singers, Brad Paisley and Carrie Underwood, and they quipped, I started signing up last Thursday, and I'm almost done. So I don't know. That's a pretty good turnaround. They shouldn't be complaining about that. We've also kind of got some returns from zombie elections. We find out that in Washington State, we had two dead candidates are winning their election races. And I guess that really kind of works if you've got people who are dead voting. Wouldn't you expect they'd vote for dead candidates? We could come up with a new party, the Dead Party, maybe, the Ungrateful Dead. I guess we're not grateful enough for what Obama's done for us with health care. Another sad thing that came out of the election results was the $22 million propaganda campaign that Monsanto ran, as Anthony Gucciardi reports on Infowars. And basically, they outspent the opposition yet again on just an honest labeling campaign for GMO. Wouldn't you like to know what's in your food? I mean, why can't we know what's in our food? I guess like laws and sausage, we're not allowed to know what's in our soda pop either. We don't want to know what goes in there, because if you knew what went into laws, sausages, and soda pop, you probably wouldn't want to have anything to do with any of those. And this happens over and over again, that we get outspent, and people are very easily swayed if they're, see, commercial after commercial, obviously. Mike Adams has an article that he put out after the election talking about that and saying over and over again, we're getting taken out at these simple issues of just letting people know what's in their food. And he pointed out that we need to change our strategy. It's a very much, we're trying to go against these people in their strength. We can't out-PR them. We can't out-advertise them. And he says we need to go to some kind of an asymmetrical warfare. And he's not talking about actually getting violent, but he's talking about how we need to not, he said the people that are running these campaigns are kind of nice. There's a lot of areas that they don't really want to go. And Mike is alluding to something that he's got coming down the road, but just in general, we notice this, that, you know, if you've got a bear coming at you, like I've talked about before back in North Carolina, they tell you to throw sticks at the bear. They tell you to yell and shout at the bear. They tell you to look aggressive, look big. They don't tell you to say, nice bear, go away. They don't tell you to get really nice and soft, because, or to run away from it, right? You do that, you're history. So you have to basically get in their face. The same sort of thing that Alex did on Piers Morgan. A lot of people liked that. And of course, there were people who didn't like that because they didn't like what Alex was saying. But it was a very powerful thing to see someone not just engage in an intellectual debate, but to actually get up and be passionate about freedom And that's what we need to see. We need to see people passionate about freedom. We need to show the effects of GMO. We need to show these pictures of the rats with massive tumors. I mean, we need to get tough with this instead of just being nice. Sometimes I'm accused of being too nice and too soft on things. We need people like Alex that are going to get out there and shout with passion, and we need to get on that with the GMO because, as I said, they're taking us out because they can outspend us with PR. Now, along the lines of Obamacare, we have this strange thing of this couple in Brooklyn that are going to get divorced so they can save money, so they can afford health insurance. You know, I think instead of them divorcing, we need to look at ways that we can divorce Obama, or at least go into some kind of a legal separation. And I think there's people who are coming up with that. Certainly as far as the NSA stuff goes, we've got a lot of people that are coming up with market solutions to the invasions of privacy that have been going on now. This was revealed several months ago, and do you see anybody in Congress doing anything about it? Me neither. But there are people in the tech community that have been busy about this on a lot of different fronts. We've got the founder of LavaBit. Now, if you remember, LavaBit was the email provider for Ed Snowden. And the feds came to him and wanted encrypted emails that belonged to Ed Snowden. And rather than turn them over, he shut down his entire service. And the same thing happened with Silent Circle. That was run by Phil Zimmerman. He's the guy that created PGP. You may remember PGP. That's been around a very, very long time. That's been around since the internet was in its infancy. I always found it clumsy to use, and so I never really used PGP. And but both of those services shut down, and now they're looking at coming up with something called dark mail, which they believe is going to be a solution to the privacy, to the snooping. And he had an interesting quote, Levinson did. He said, if you knew what I know about email, you might not use it. It's kind of like what I mentioned before, you know, about if you knew what goes into sausage and into legislation, you wouldn't want to have anything to do with either one of those, as Bismarck said. Now, he's not only coming up with dark mail, but there's also projects out there. Cody Wilson, who did the 3D printable gun, has got Dark Wallet, which is a way to keep your anonymity, a little bit stronger protection for your anonymity within Bitcoin, because you put things in your wallet, and there are ways that people can discover your wallet. When the FBI confiscated the coins from Silk Road, when they shut it down, they got about 26,000 coins. That was identified by someone in the Bitcoin community. So now when those coins are spent, you know that they're coming from the FBI. They labeled that wallet. Dark wallet. So there's ways that they can do that. If someone makes a connection to you, then basically you lose that anonymity. They're coming up with a new way to keep that private called Dark Wallet. And of course, there's another program you might want to know about, Safe Slinger. That's a free text security program that is available for free with iPhone and with Android. I've got that. That's actually a very interesting program because you basically get with someone in person and you compare things that are on your two phones and you get matches on those two phones, and that's the way you set up your keys between those two people. So you're not transmitting anything at all in the clear. You're kind of doing it there where you're standing next to each other. The free market is going to come up with solutions to this tyranny and this oppression. I don't think we're going to see it from the government, certainly not going to see it from Washington. They just keep on doing the same thing. There's no legislation being brought out by anyone that I'm aware of that's going to rein any of this stuff in. And every day we get more revelations about what the government's doing. Today we find from the New York Times that CIA is said to be paying AT&T for call data. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. What they say is that under a voluntary contract and not under subpoena, that AT&T is cooperating with them. So they're not getting subpoenas, they're not getting court orders, they're just doing it voluntarily. The reason they can do that is because the government maintains the idea that if you give your information to a third party, like to a phone company or to an internet provider, then that third party can voluntarily turn over your private information, and they don't need a search warrant. In other words, if they were to come directly to you, they would need a search warrant. But if they get it from somebody that you gave it to, they're saying that they don't need a search warrant. That's one of the major reasons that they're coming up with CISPA, is to give litigation protection to these companies because they've essentially betrayed their trust to you. Even though they may have it, and probably do have it, buried somewhere in their constantly changing terms of and services conditions. Still, what they're doing is they're cooperating with the government, and they still have some legal exposure in that. So that's one of the things that CISPA was about giving these large corporations legal immunity from lawsuits because they violate your property, your privacy, turning over your information voluntarily to the government. So we see that the CIA is doing that now with AT&T. No big surprise there. We also see, though, that the inventor of the World Wide Web is criticizing the NSA over privacy breaches. This is a story from, it just broke today. This is coming from the Telegraph. And this is exactly the sort of thing we're seeing. This is where our hope for privacy lies in the future. We can't really divorce Obama and these other guys because they're kind of running these crooked elections, but we can get a legal separation. We can legally move ourselves away from these guys. And there are a lot of people who are very angry, very upset now that they see these Snowden revelations. And they're going to keep offering solutions to us in the private sector where we can get another internet that's separate from it. I don't think that the BRICS internet number 2 from Russia and China, I don't think that's going to offer any privacy, but we're going to see what happens with these private ones. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex, and we're going to be joined here at the bottom of the hour with Paul Joseph Watson from England. And we're going to be talking about his article today about a guy calling for forced abortions. But there's a story that's going on here in Texas, and I interviewed the fellow last Friday on the Infowars Nightly News, Mark Crutcher from Life Dynamics. They broke this story back in May. And so far, nothing has happened with it. They filmed, let's take a look at what some of these witnesses in an abortion, actually there's a clinic workers that have witnessed live babies being murdered by an abortionist there, exactly like the Kermit Gosnell case. And let's look at what they had to say. This is a short clip here.
You see the baby alive?
Yes, sir.
And him kill that baby outside the womb?
Yes, sir.
And this would be done by jamming some sort of instrument into the
either that or
soft spot,
or actually twisting the head off the neck, kind of with his own bare hands.
And you saw that happen?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
So he would twist the head off. I'm sorry.
Sometimes he would go through the stomach as well.
Sometimes he would do what?
He would like force it through the stomach.
The instrument,
mm-hmm.
Is it beards?
And like twist it.
Yeah.
And you saw that?
Mm-hmm.
Anything that he could get to the fastest, like she said, the umbilical. He was probably perforating the umbilical cord. I normally saw either the snipping of the spine or the introduction of the instrument in the soft spot of the fetus, normally, or twisting of the neck.
I remember he would put like his finger.
Yeah, or his finger.
No.
He'd take his finger and then
through the throat.
Yeah.
I have watched that several times, and I cannot get used to that. That is essentially the same thing that Kermit Gosnell was convicted to life in prison for, and several of his co-workers there at that clinic. And as Life Dynamics has pointed out, if you are a worker in one of these clinics and you don't come forward and put this out there, you are an accessory to murder, and we've already seen that happen in the Kermit Gosnell case. Now, this was just a clip of the testimony that they had. They had the full testimony, and they sent that to several law enforcement sources so they could see the unedited testimony. They sent it to the Homicide Division of the Houston Police Department. They sent it to the Texas Medical Board. They sent it to the Texas Department of State Health Services, and they sent it to some state legislators. And 20 Texas lawmakers sent letters to these people saying that they wanted an investigation. And yet here we are, about 5 or 6 months later. That was in May. We're now in November. Nothing has been done yet. It's kind of like the Sherlock Holmes story, the dog that didn't bark. And so the question is, why is there no investigation going on? There's connections between the mayor of Houston and Planned Parenthood. Her partner, she's openly homosexual. Her partner is very high up in the Planned Parenthood, and also part of the. There's some issues with campaign finance that I'm not sure if those were vetted out or if they're still under investigation. But this article, there was a lot of coverage of it in May when it happened because they released this information right after the Gosnell trial, and it was picked up by the Daily Mail and others. The Daily Mail went the headline, Second House of Horror abortion clinic where doctor twisted heads off of fetuses and necks with his bare hands is investigated in Texas. Well, it's not clear that it is being investigated in Texas. Scroll down to that article, guys. Take a look at this abortion clinic. And every time you see an abortion clinic, this thing is set up, it looks like some kind of a dark prison. You can look at this on Google Street View. That's what they embedded in the article. A metal gate around it, concrete bunker-like building with a few windows. Most of the time, they don't even have windows on the first floor, so you can't see in. It's a very, very dark thing. Now, a couple of weeks after they put this out, there was a reaction. Houston Chronicle came out and said, the headline was, anti-abortion group targets doctor, some call it a witch hunt. And they had a quote in there. Now listen to this quote, and consider the source. This is from Amy Miller, the founder of Whole Woman's Health, which operates 5 abortion clinics in Texas. She said, you have to consider the source and the motivations. You have to know it is a political tool with an agenda. Now, Amy Miller, who runs 5 abortion clinics, she wouldn't have any motivations in this, would she? In calling it a witch hunt? She wouldn't have any kind of agenda, would she? It's a very, very sick thing, but it's becoming socially acceptable for people to talk about not only abortions, but to talk about forced abortions, forced sterilization. And we're going to be talking to Paul Joseph Watson about the article that's on Infowars today about that and about many other subjects when we come back. It's something we all need to think about. And I think when you see a partial birth abortion or you see something like this, it really makes you think.
We're on the march.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex. And we're joined right now with Paul Joseph Watson from England, one of our Infowars staff writers. I'm sure you've read his fine articles that he puts out all the time. One of the key writers that we have here. We've got a great staff on the website, as you all know, I'm sure. Paul, are you there?
Yes, good to be here, David.
Hey, it's nice to talk to you finally. We've sent emails back and forth, but I've never actually talked to you in the past. So I don't know if you heard this story that I was just talking about that's happening in Houston, where we have another Kermit Gosnell situation. We got a doctor who has been accused of his staff of twisting the heads off of babies that are born alive. And yet here we are about 6 months after these revelations came out, and no investigation is being conducted as far as we know.
I mean, it's really amazing. Even the people I talk to who are against abortion, they then either meet people or directly come into contact with hospitals that carry out abortions. And that turns them anti-abortion simply through seeing the horrific procedures. Because there's this idea that, people think it's like putting down an animal or something. It's not. It's completely horrific if you actually look at the procedures that they have to go through to actually abort babies. And, in terms of Gosnell and people like him, he kind of drew enjoyment out of it. And even the people blowing the whistle on him, they were involved in it as well. But now we've got a guy who is a prominent activist, gay rights activist, who appeared on Australian television. And he openly advocated that abortion be made mandatory for 30 years, forced abortion. And I think we've got the clip.
Yeah, let's play that clip.
Do you each think would have the greatest potential to change the world for the better if it were implemented?
Dan, let's start with you.
Oh my God. You got to give us a minute to think about that.
Population control. There's too many goddamn people on the planet. And I don't know if that's
applaud that.
I'm pro-choice. I believe that women should have the right to control their bodies. Sometimes in my darker moments, I'm anti-choice. I think abortion should be mandatory for about 30 years. That's a dangerous idea. She wanted a dangerous idea. So throw a chair at me.
That is a very dangerous idea.
I actually have to think about it for a minute.
Wow. They can talk about that in the abstract, but I've got an idea. I've got an idea that's pretty dangerous. So we actually had a revolution over it, that we have a creator that endows us with certain inalienable rights like life and liberty. And Jefferson, who wrote that, also said, the God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time. The hand of force can destroy but not disjoin them. You cannot have any freedom if you're going to allow people to, at some point in time, kill other people, because then you get on this slippery slope as to when you can kill people, when can you euthanize people, when can you abort people.
Well, and you know, how that is carried out in countries that do provide forced abortion is, again, horrific. I mean, look at China. They literally kidnap women off the streets or out of their own beds, beat them up, forcibly drag them to state hospitals, inject them with abortion-inducing drugs, and they have the forced abortion. It's completely horrific. And this is basically what he's calling for. And this is not some, you know, guy on the sidelines. He's quite prominent. He's got 170,000 followers on Twitter. He's regularly on HBO Real Time with Bill Maher. This is a prominent guy. Imagine the outrage if a prominent anti-abortion activist had called for all homosexuals to be killed. Yeah. That would be a massive, massive outrage. This happened 3-4 days ago. Barely a whimper, barely anything. And we can get into the moral outrage in a minute, but it's this notion about overpopulation, which again and again we have to restate is a complete myth. Mm-hmm. It's a bankrupt argument, both scientifically and factually. The replacement rate for humans is 2.1 children. If we don't achieve that rate globally, then the human population will eventually die out. Already in half the world, we're below 2.1. I mean, look at Europe, for example. Italy is 1.4, Spain 1.48, Germany 1.36. Even in America, it's down to 1.89, which again is below the replacement rate. That's right. A couple has to have 2.1 children for the replacement rate of human population to be kept stable. If it's below that, then we're in decline.
And there's a lot of factors that come into that. It's not just economic factors. It's also things like pollutants in the water or plastic, BPA, that lower fertility rates.
Well, precisely. There are a lot of different factors that contribute to it. The general theme is what they call demographic transition, which is this shift from high birth rate and high death rate, which obviously happened during times of heightened disease, to low birth rate and low death rate, which is the phase that we've now definitely shifted into. So even in countries like Brazil, India, and Indonesia, where people think that the population is skyrocketing beyond all control, they're in fact now also falling below the rate of fertility. And the UN's own figures, this is not Infowars.com. This is not some right-wing think tank that's come out with these figures. This is the UN Population Fund. Their own figures show world population will get to about 9 billion by 2050. After that, it will start to decline dramatically. And the problem in the future is going to be underpopulation, not overpopulation. Right. So any policy or any advocacy based on the justification of preventing overpopulation is completely fraudulent.
And you see in Russia, they've figured that out. They're actually trying to give bonuses to people who have children, Putin is. But away from that, away from the Malthusian nonsense that's been disproven over and over again, back to the moral issue. I guess it kind of comes back to the point where it's very easy for somebody to talk about population control in the abstract because they don't really see what's happening. As you mentioned, people that you know that have gone to abortion clinics and have seen it, it takes it away from the abstract. It's kind of like, I think, so many people in the abstract, they're not really worried about the NSA listening to their data, but you take that situation where Tom Mabe, the comedian, went out with a boom mic and a NSA or CIA type of suit, you know, black suit with sunglasses, and he starts recording people's conversations, standing in front of them with a boom mic. They instantly see that as an offense. And I think people obviously understand that when these children are born alive, that's a horrible thing, what was described that this doctor was doing. And you also see that happening with partial birth abortion, where they would partially take the child that could survive on its own and abort the child and call it an abortion because part of the baby is still inside of the mother. You get into this slippery slope area where are you going to say that it's a murder if the baby is partially inside the mother, if it's totally removed from the mother, if it's full term? At what point do you decide that it's murder? And that's the problem. It's kind of the same thing that we see happening in Gitmo. There was an article today from Russia Today, and this fellow was talking about how he was tortured in Gitmo. And he said it was an area without any laws. And that's what happens when you give people the capability to torture and to kill. Then you've got a situation where it becomes a situational ethics, where they can change the situation. They can do that to anybody.
Yeah, and it's end justifies the means, isn't it? It's this whole idea of disrespecting life and frowning upon life and thinking that life has no meaning, no value, which is what happens in China and increasingly in Western countries, where you see, you know, babies by the side of the road or young children who have been run over by cars, and people just walk past ignoring them as they lie in the gutter bleeding. That's what it all leads towards. And it's interesting with this whole overpopulation thing, because, I mean, for example, I was at a safari park here near where I live recently, and they were doing a cheetah demonstration. And it turned out that the actual safari park was involved with David Attenborough, who basically says that humans are a plague and we should stop feeding the third world.
The old Gaia theory.
Yeah, and the Optimum Population Trust. And they were indoctrinating British children through this Optimum Population Trust to not have kids of their own in order to save the cheetahs. Now, David, how many wild cheetahs live in Britain?
You probably saw all of them in that park, didn't you, Paul?
Yeah, that was probably half of them. But again, why are they teaching British kids not to have children to save the cheetahs? How on earth are those two linked? The decline of cheetah population is due to deforestation, which coincidentally, a lot of the global warming alarmists are behind with the growing of the biofuel, which is causing massive deforestation. But they link it to, if you know, you've got to only have one child or don't have any children at all in Britain, which also has a fertility rate under 2.1. So we're dying off as well, even with the immigration. They're saying you can't have kids either to save the cheetahs who don't even live in Britain.
They really hammer that there. I remember taking my family to London about 15 years ago and going to the Children's Museum, and they had a loop talking about exactly what you're talking about. A loop, it was essentially the Gaia theory, you know, where mankind is a virus on the planet's surface. And they just played this. All these kids are up there playing at the highest level of the floor. They had a play area for the kids. And they've got this large television set just playing this propaganda film over and over again, telling them that humans are a plague. Overpopulation is destroying all the other life forms, and we need to get rid of the humans. I mean, it's absolute eugenicism.
It is, but
total population control.
Even they must know that it's completely fraudulent. They must know the real science, which I just talked about. So it even goes beyond like racist eugenicist beliefs about culling the herd, to the point where the elite act as if they totally have hate and contempt for humanity, like they're some kind of invading alien species that's being brought here to wipe us all out. I mean, it's difficult to put it into logic because they must know that it's complete nonsense, and yet they still push it. They indoctrinate the children with this belief, this eugenicist belief.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you've got another article you wanted to talk about. You told me that utility bills in Europe, of course, are skyrocketing because of carbon taxes and other regulations. It's another part of just the entire oppressive infrastructure of changing not only the number of people that we've got, but the quality of everyone's life. And really, if you look at it, it's not just a quality of life issue, but it is also an issue of how long you're going to live. If you look at cheap, available energy, that's a very good predictor of lifespan for a community.
Well, yeah, it's, you know, CO2 emissions are directly linked to prosperity, to quality of life, which is what this post-industrial revolution is all about. Recently in Britain and in Europe in general, people are paying 17% more for their energy bills. There was this big controversy about the energy companies raising their electricity and gas prices. And the explanation given for that was that it was these greedy energy companies hoarding all the profit. It was this socialistic explanation. But what the news media, especially the BBC, didn't explain is the fact that these energy companies are mandated to implement European Union CO2 emission targets of 20% below 1990 levels. And the way they do that is by funding, quote, renewable energy like wind farms, which, as we know, are completely useless. It actually costs more money in public subsidies to keep them running than the actual monetary value of the energy they generate. So these energy companies have to pay money to build wind farms. Meanwhile, as in America with the EPA, they're being forced to mothball coal plants which provide cheap energy. And these costs for renewable energy are being passed on directly to the consumer. So it's already a carbon tax by stealth. So it's not the greedy energy companies that are doing this. They're being mandated by law to enforce European Union CO2 emission targets. So again, it goes back to this idea of collecting power in the hands of the state. Socialists will complain and whine all day about high energy bills, and they'll blame the greedy companies for it, but it's not their fault. They're only enforcing what they're mandated to do by the government, which is what's causing these energy prices to rise.
Yeah, you know, renewable energy is a very trendy thing, and it's a great idea when you do it individually, when you do it off the grid. If you want to get solar power, if you want to get wind power, and you can pay most expensive part of those systems is trying to store the energy so that you have something, if you're off the grid, you have something when the wind is not blowing or when the sun is not shining. It really doesn't work for a major company, for the utility companies that are on the grid, because they have to store the energy and they can't keep up with the, especially for wind power. It's constant. If you look at the output, it's not a constant output, it's constantly changing. And it basically is all over the place. They built a large wind farm off the coast of Ireland, and they thought that if they extended it over a larger area that they would smooth out the peaks and the troughs, but instead all they got were larger peaks and larger troughs, and there's no way to smooth that out. You can't have electricity that is pulsating up and down over the grid. It has to be very stabilized. So that what they wind up doing is cycling these existing coal plants as if they were some kind of an AC power source, and it increases the carbon output of the coal plants by making them turn on and turn off to supplement the power that they're getting from the wind.
Well, precisely. And I mean, look at what's happening in Spain. You've got people who've got solar panels, which is all fine and well. And now the government is taxing them for generating energy with their own solar panels.
Right.
So they won't let you have self-sufficiency. But the point about the energy bills is, you know, it's not hitting the corporations, the oil and energy companies. It's hitting 80-year-old pensioners in Europe, some of whom are literally going to freeze to death this winter because they can't afford to pay the bills. And it's these green taxes. It's carbon taxes by default. They didn't have to impose it on, you know, tax per mile. In Europe, they're already doing it. In America, you've got the shale boom, which is kind of offsetting it a lot, but it's going to come to America too. And again, it's about post-industrial revolution. It's about a green economy, which in Spain has caused a 26% unemployment rate, 56% youth unemployment rate. And Obama said that was the model for America. So you've got that to look forward to.
Well, you know, you mentioned the tax per mile. Now they're starting to talk about that in the U.S. as well. So you get people who go out and they buy renewable energy sources like solar, and then they get taxed by the Spanish authorities for having solar panels. You have people who go out and buy fuel-efficient cars, and then they change the method of taxation. We have a gasoline tax, which is basically a use tax. It's an anonymous use tax that they don't have to know where you're going or how much you're driving. They don't have to track that, but it also reflects your use of the road. And you can do something to, if you're concerned about exhaust emissions for whatever reason, you can get a more fuel-efficient car. But now they're going to penalize the people who have invested in fuel-efficient cars.
Well, that's similar to what's happening in France, which is this eco tax on vehicles weighing over 3.5 tons. So any vehicle that they're using to transport goods is now being hit with this eco tax. They had to temporarily roll it back because this past weekend there were huge riots in Brittany and other areas of France. But they're now, again, taxing, as you said, for use of vehicles, not merely taxed by mile. And that's
affecting farmers in those areas as well, because they're the ones who are really getting hit with it. And of course, it's going to come out in people's food costs. And people are going to say, the greedy farmers, just like they talk about the greedy coal companies. Hang on, Paul. We're going to be right back right after the break. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex, and I'm talking to Paul Joseph Watson. And we've been talking about renewable energy and what it's doing to fuel prices in England. Now, I said we would take your calls, and we've got a very special caller who always goes to the front of the line. That's Alex Jones, and he wanted to get in on this renewable energy discussion that we're having. Alex, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm out here taking care of errands for the Infowars operation, about to back into the office. But just listen to the great job you're both involved in. I'll let you get to those calls in this segment. And the next, they've got a lot of other special reports coming up today with Anthony Gucciardi, Yukari Jackson, and others, and phone calls. But listen, I just want to make it clear. The globalists are all on record. I made the film Endgame about this with their own statements. They are creating a post-industrial world on purpose because the mega elite corporations are all exempt from these regulations. GE is exempt from the coal regulations that all the other companies aren't. All the big companies are exempt from the Obamacare. That is the heart of all this that cuts right through all their fake arguments. They are conscious criminals consolidating the economy, but creating socialism and communism at the grassroots. They're offshore exempt under fascism with diplomatic immunity to make you dependent. So they will always raise the taxes, and they will always raise the price of energy, the ultimate tax. It's a form of siege, to where it's impossible to pay. And that is how they social engineer. It is totally diabolical. Look at Venezuela going bankrupt with their health care. Look at EU healthcare going bankrupt. But the elites all have their private clinics. So this is the plan. And people have to understand, it's not socialist mismanagement. People wonder why it's so screwed up. It couldn't be worse because it's precision military economic warfare on record, and that's what they're doing. That's why I'm not against gay people. I don't even think about that. They say, oh, you don't want to accept me teaching your 5-year-olds about it. It's in all the government documents that we cover in Endgame 1.5 that they said, we're going to teach this and go after heterosexuals in the family and tax the family where you cannot reproduce. We're going to add sterilants. And that's why they have the gay leaders everywhere. Literally, I was invited 10 years ago to a birthday party of a cousin who's gay. And the people all walked up to me bigotedly. I mean, I'm talking at a bar with like 100 gay people, okay? And henpecked all the straight people there and told me it was gross that I had a son and that my wife was pregnant again because she was there and pregnant. And they literally ran us out of there. They were bigoted. I'm not bigoted, and I'm sick of it. This is a type of biological suicide bombing operation to cut everything off and to teach our kids, that you don't need to have kids and it's bad. At Whole Foods, people marched up to my wife probably 15 times and said, you shouldn't have 3 kids. They can go to hell. I'll have more if I can. Anyways, God bless you, gentlemen. That's what I call them about. They are the racists. They are the bigots. I'm not talking about the average gay person out there. I'm talking about the establishment using it as a weapon against humanity. God bless you, gentlemen.
And it's not just that they're exempt from the taxes, Alex. Is that look who they want us to pay for indulgences. They want us to talk. They want us to give money to Blood and Gore, to Al Gore and his partner, Blood. They want us to pay them like a religious indulgence to use energy. They want to make everybody renters. They don't want anybody to have anything. Just like the Federal Reserve, just like we have to pay them every time a dollar is created, every time you use a watt of energy, you have to pay Blood and Gore. What do you think about that, Paul?
Well, I mean, that's it. And going back to Ted Turner, he got 5 kids. I mean, he supports the one-child policy for the world, and he's got 5 children. Yeah. Same with Al Gore. I think he's got 4 kids.
Well, he's exempt.
Yeah, they're all exempt from it. Don't worry about that.
That's right, yeah.
But it's cultural Marxism, isn't it? This whole idea of attacking the family in Western civilization. It's about creating the myth that oppression comes from traditional Western institutions, and that is naturally oppressive. Well, it's blatant cultural Marxism.
It goes all the way back to Plato's Republic. He wanted to destroy the family because he wanted to make the government strong. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex, and I've got Paul Joseph Watson on the line with me. We just had a discussion with Alex, also talking about the eugenics, the forced abortions, population control that are being called for, the skyrocketing energy prices, attacks on the family. These are all related, aren't they, Paul?
They're all tied together. It's part of the post-industrial revolution. It's the attack on Western civilization, the attack on biblical Christian beliefs, which for better or worse have provided stability in the West, and now they're trying to overthrow that. And as I said before the break, it's cultural Marxism to the nth degree.
That's right. And we're talking about, briefly, I mentioned Plato's Republic. He wanted to make sure that in his ideal republic, where you were going to have this benevolent dictator, presumably, he wanted to make sure that there was no family structure. So he promoted sexual promiscuity so that nobody would know who their mother and father were. And the children would be raised by the state, and the children would be loyal to the state, not to a family, not to a mother and father. And that's the same type of program that we see actually put into the government schools. That was in the writing of Thomas Dewey and Horace Mann, many of the founders of government education in America. They were not happy with the way families were raising their children. They didn't want them to have these religious values or whatever. They wanted to move them into a socialist control where the government told them what to think, what to do, shaped everything for them. The old adage, give me a child by the time they're, you know, up to the age of 3, they're mine for life, that type of thing.
It's similar, isn't it, to both the Communist Manifesto and that document which they called the 45 Declared Goals of Communism. That was all about weakening the family, and also a lot of the cultural aspects that they introduced from the 60s onwards were about that, including specifically modern art, which it later turned out was funded from the 50s, Jackson Pollock and all that crowd, by the CIA itself to make art non-political. So through a variety of different cultural ways, they tried to weaken the fundamental base of Western civilization, and they're aggressively doing it to this day.
That's right. Let's move on to another article that you've got up. DHS publicly denies preparation for riots and civil unrest. Now, you've been at the forefront of showing us what the DHS is really preparing for, what Homeland Security is doing, buying massive amounts of ammunition. You went to the FedBiz.op site. You showed the actual documents where they're ordering this stuff, and there was a lot of pushback on it. It took a very long time, but finally everybody started to realize this is real.
Exactly, and then the DHS came out a couple of days ago to the International Business Times and said, basically, these reports are false. They're not preparing for riots. Their direct quote was, this routine acquisition planning is not in response to or anticipation of any potential situation. But in their own solicitation documents, they said precisely the opposite.
These preparations are not routine in any way, shape, or form. I mean, just the ammunition that they're buying is enough, as people have pointed out, to fight the Iraq War at its peak for 20 years.
And the armed guards, $80 million in armed guards in New York, they said, I didn't say it, Infowars didn't say it, the DHS said it was for, quote, public demonstrations and civil disturbances. Those were their words, not mine. And then with the pepper spray projectiles, they said, these are just for training purposes. They bought 117,000 training projectiles. They also purchased 120,000 live projectiles. So they're not just for training purposes. And again, when they bought riot gear back in June, the DHS itself admitted that they were for, quote, riot control situations. So they're admitting it's for riot control. Then publicly, months later, they come out and say, oh, it's just routine. It's no specific situation. Again, they're lying. It says in their own documents that they are for riot control.
Yeah, they were telling us that's what hollow point bullets were for. And they would go in and cherry pick the very smallest purchases and say there's nothing to worry about. Paul, it was great talking to you.
Good to be on, David.
Thanks. And we're going to be right back with Anthony Gucciardi right after the break. And we've got some other interesting things to talk about with eugenics. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex. We were just talking to Paul Joseph Watson about calls for Malthusian population control and the applause that celebrities get when they call for that. And before that, I talked about a doctor that we've got here in Houston that they're trying to get an investigation. He's not being investigated. I wish I could say that he was, but there's no evidence that the Houston authorities are actually conducting an investigation. But he's been accused by workers in his clinic of killing babies that were born alive, twisting the heads off of newborn babies. And so far as we can tell, there's no investigation going in Houston about that. But that's kind of the topic that we've been on. We've been talking about that, population control, and now we've got Anthony Gucciardi from StoryLeak joining us here, and he's got an interesting take on this whole eugenicist thing from Reddit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, exactly. So just going into this, even some of the most hardened listeners right now, they might know eugenics by definition means selective breeding. But throughout history, its implementation has always been to take certain races certain individuals they deemed unfit to breed and sterilize them or kill them off. And that even happened in the United States from about 1929 to 1974. Admittedly, in the open, they would go in and break down your door and forcibly sterilize you. I mean, that's from the Associated Press. We're talking about 60,000 people that were forcibly sterilized, mainly black women. And it is actually inherently real racism. It's not phony racism like the media uses.
It's not like this voter ID thing. I mean, you're not asking for somebody. You're not saying that we want to see your photo ID before so we can verify your identity and vote. You're actually saying we're going to stop you from reproducing because of who you are.
No, this is kick down your door and inject you and sterilize you, and you are unfit to breed. You are not a human being with any rights, going directly against the Constitution. But the reason I get into this specifically is, yes, we did have that history where 60,000 in the United States just after World War II were sterilized, in many cases with North Carolina specifically, where they awarded the families a mere $50,000 and said, we're sorry that we sterilized individuals in your family and kicked down their door and beat them and everything like that, sometimes killed them. That was their severance package.
I guess they figured that was a benefit because one of the tactics that abortionists will use is to tell a woman who's considering an abortion, look at how much this child is going to cost you of your life. You can't afford this. So I guess if they look at this and say, well, you know, we saved you all this money that you're going to have to feed this child and put them through college. So we saved you all that money. So here's your $50,000 extra.
It's trendy now not to have children. It's trendy now to say abortions are good up to age 5. But we're specifically going to get into this amazing revelation here that surprisingly, apparently, a large percentage of people actually support eugenics in modern day. We're talking about forced sterilization of 13-year-olds. We're talking about saying that Hitler ruined eugenics for the rest of us. We're talking about saying eugenics is good because it makes people more handsome. We shouldn't let certain people breed. We shouldn't let individuals who are susceptible to committing crimes breed. And this is on Reddit. And I'm not against Reddit. I think it's actually a good hub for internet freedom. It's a good hub for alternative news, but it's a collective group of individuals. Reddit is essentially a social community for those who are not aware. It's essentially an adaptation, let's say, of Facebook. It's a message board where you post articles and you can comment on them. And it's just, a medley of individuals. But we've found that when you're using an anonymous username, individuals will actually come out and support Hitler and will support eugenics.
Well, that's a good point.
And the programming is so strong on that. But first, before we even get into that in this segment, I wanted to talk specifically about historically leading up to this, how it's already been going on. For example, we see the U.S. government program that secretly injected citizens with plutonium just to see how it would affect them and how it would affect different races of people. So specifically, I don't know if you're even aware of this, David, they called it one of the most appalling acts by the United States government, even the mainstream media. They went around in 1945 and secretly injected a 53-year-old man with 4.7 micrograms of plutonium. And just to see what happened, they did it with a bunch of others. This is specifically one individual. His name was Eb Cade. And what happened was he was blasted with extreme amounts of plutonium, and they cut out a piece of his bone without, any drugs or anything for sampling. They pulled 15 of his teeth in order to test the effects of the plutonium, and the torture was so bad that he escaped the hospital in the middle of the night and ran away and from the prolonged torture where they just cutting him open, just ripping things out of his body to test to see the plutonium effects and say, hey, how did it affect this man? How did it affect this woman? Over and over again. He escaped, and then he eventually died.
I'm not surprised.
That is what's going on. And that was funded by the government. They told the doctors, hey, just don't tell anyone about it. We'll give you a major severance package. Just do this to everyone. And they would have people coming in with broken arms saying, hey, my arm is broken, or a pregnant woman saying, hey, I'm not feeling too good. Oh, yeah, we've got something for that. And they inject you with plutonium just to see what would happen.
Well, Anthony, it was about a year ago that the story broke that in North Carolina, right, where I had moved from, the EPA was grabbing people for, they were trying to make a case for stronger regulations of particulate matter. And they were putting out ads for people, specifically looking for people who had asthma or other breathing irregularities, and they were hooking them up to machines that were feeding them diesel fumes directly and experimenting on them. And a lawsuit was filed, and the government said, we're the government. We don't have to really follow those rules. They got away with it. They didn't stop it. They continued doing it. And so that's still going on to this very day.
No, it always happens. And then like decades later, a figure in the United States will apologize for it. Like Obama will say, sorry, we secretly injected you with STDs just to see what would happen. And the reason we're talking about this is all of this ties into eugenics. And let's give it a new term. Neo-eugenics is the new idea here. That is old school, Hitlerian-style eugenics where it's out in the open, going in and forcibly sterilizing people. We're going to get into what these people are saying in the comments with 3,000 upvotes about Hitler just ruined eugenics for the rest of us, how eugenics isn't even bad. It's just been given a bad name. And hey, Tesla supported it. Tesla did actually support it. But let's get into this. So the post that we're speaking of right now, and I only have the printouts. I will have a report about this on StoryLeak and Infowars.com. It's talking about, today I learned that Nikola Tesla was in favor of sterilizing criminals and mentally unstable and believed that by 2100, the year 2100, no one who is not a desirable parent should be permitted to produce progeny. Now, there's a bunch of different comments here with major upvotes, specifically 2,000, 3,000, top comments, top upvotes. And this is a website that gets millions of users a day. And again, I'm not against the site overall. It's just this thread of comments is amazing to me. This guy says he's the number, I believe he's the number 3 comment on there, the majorly upvoted. He says, Hitler ruined eugenics for the rest of us. It has 2,325 upvotes. That's mean 2,325 people agree with it. And that's not even counting the downvotes.
The amazing thing is that because Tesla was for it, or because Hitler was for it, I mean, you look at this and you evaluate it on its own moral grounds. It doesn't, Tesla did electricity. He wasn't a moral ethicist. And so just because he supported this doesn't make it right. But that's the way people think. They look at people that they like or people that they don't like, and that's what's their comment there.
It's all
like,
intense programming. You're 100% right. Look at the drama series where they admit that they were given money to support Obamacare and stuff like that. Anything people see on TV, they try to be that. Yeah. Because that is their only embodiment of social interaction sometimes.
And they sell personalities. That's the way Obama got in, because most people liked him. He had no history. Nobody knew what he was really, where he was coming from. Well, he did have some history in Chicago. I mean, you knew that he was the most supportive of abortions of anybody that had ever been in office. He supported late-term abortions very strongly. We knew a few other things about him. For the most part, he was a blank slate. And even the people who voted for him said they were very disappointed, that they thought he was going to be like X. He turned out to be like Y. But they were voting for a personality. And that's what people are doing here. They're like you said, they're attaching themselves to a personality. Hitler was bad and he gave a stigma to this. Tesla was good. So let's talk about Tesla liking eugenics so we can make eugenics popular now.
Well, that's why Bill Gates says, we need to vaccinate more people so that we can reduce the population. People like that are propped up on a pedestal and act like they're genius, so we need to listen to them. But at a deeper level, it's this weird, ironic, disturbing racism that is actually proliferating this entire progressive concept, or this entire neo-eugenics concept, that, yes, certain people are unfit to breathe. The elderly are wastes of space. We actually should have death panels. But then at the same time, they'll say, all white people are bad because George Zimmerman, who isn't even white, defended himself against a black man. And it's this weird, distorted, nefarious race baiting when we're looking at comments now from individuals that would, no question, identify as progressives or liberals or whatever, and it doesn't even matter. It's all phony system. I know that. But look at this comment. This guy, he has 194 upvotes, and he is being supported. He says, honestly, if they could make it 100% reversible, all males should be sterilized before they turn 13. No more oopsies. It will have to be consensual to have children. And he goes on and says, hey, there are women who poke holes in condoms to impregnate others and, stuff like that. We need to end this right now. And he goes on to say, he had a child on accident and it was not on purpose and a mistake. And he said, you can be upset at me for saying this, but I told my son he was an accident. And I would like to prevent future people from having kids who aren't fit to breed. And then others go in and they say, well, hey, did you hear about this new male birth control procedure? It's 100% effective in the last 10 years. And the response is, just telling my roommates about this, possibly the best invention ever, permanent sterilization. And then they say, well, hey, it's worth it. A needle to the genitals is a lot less painful than letting go of your future plans because you had a child come into the picture. Wow. Children are now evil.
Yeah.
I mean, people actually think that everyone should be forcibly sterilized before they turn 13. I mean, maybe they're going to get that with Gardasil anyway, though. In California, you don't need parental permission to go in and inject girls and soon enough boys with Gardasil.
That's really scary. And you know, people like this are the ones who are very easily brought into thinking that they're going to be part of the elite who are going to be fine. You know, if we're going to take out the entire population with some kind of mouse pox, that's okay. I'm going to be one of the guys that's going to survive. I'm going to cooperate with the system. That kind of rampant elitism, divorced from any morality, divorced from any sensitivity to anybody, is really, really frightening. We're going to be back, talk a little bit more about this with Anthony Gucciardi. Stay tuned.
My friends, Alex Jones here.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and I'm joined in studio here with Anthony Gucciardi of StoryLeak. And we were just talking about, did Hitler give eugenics a bad name? There's a lot of people out there now that are still talking about population control. As Anthony pointed out, we've got a long history in this country of experimentation on people. And we just had that a year ago with the EPA in North Carolina conducting experiments, having people directly breathe diesel gas. But it's far worse than that, as Anthony pointed out. We got people who were injected with plutonium and other horrendous things. We've got a clip here from Bill Gates talking about death panels and health care. Let's take a look at what the elitists really think. And before we do that, let me give out our phone number, 800-259-9231. If you agree with this elitism, with this eugenics, give us a call. If you want to make the case that you think that Hitler gave eugenics a bad name, you think that we really ought to control the population, you think we really ought to be selective about who's allowed to have children, if you think that the population is too great and we need to have forced population control, forced abortions, give us a call at 800-259-9231. We only want people who disagree with us on this. Let's take a look at that, what Bill Gates thinks about this.
That's a trade-off society is making because of very, very high medical costs and a lack of willingness to say, you know, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers and to make that trade-off in medical costs? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion. So you, of course,
well, that's an interesting thing you just said, which is just the last 3 months in life for one person or something, because we haven't had a discussion of how to allocate that money. I mean,
there you go. I mean, if Bill Gates is for it and Tesla is for it, I mean, how can we disagree with people of that stature?
Notice how calm they are. Oh, that's an interesting idea that we should kill off people that we are deeming less worthy than ourselves. It's the whole notion here. And the reason we're highlighting this is that this isn't just a historical fact that 60,000 were forcibly sterilized. This isn't just a historical fact that the government admittedly, documents show, and they're now apologizing for it, injected people with STDs, injected people with plutonium just to see what would happen. That is actually real racism. That is actually real population control, Hitlerian style. And then we're looking at these comments here, and there's a few more off of Reddit, which again is just a community website. Reddit itself is not saying this; it's equivalent to Facebook. People on Facebook saying this, but there's thousands of them. There's millions of users on this website saying, upvoting these different comments that are saying, for example, it's not that the morals were different back then, it's that science was. If sterilizing the mentally ill would actually work to prevent crime, I'd be all for it. Though it'd be something of a sacrifice, obviously. That's another comment. The problem is that it wouldn't work, so it would be a cruel, seeming, and pointless sacrifice, so I do oppose it. And then he goes on to say, but you know, if it did work, if we could identify pre-crime, then we should sterilize them because they're criminals. So what does pre-crime mean, though?
Well, maybe we could tell, you know, by the number of bumps on their head. You know, remember phrenology, where they would identify people as criminals by their facial features? I mean, that was essentially kind of feeding in a way to this whole racism thing. You look a certain way, you act a certain way. You know, we can take out one of the things about Bill Gates' comment there that strikes me is the fact that he's going to make these decisions for us. And that all comes along with the government controlling our health care. Again, you know, he's sitting there thinking, well, you know, what should our trade-offs be? Should we allow this older person to have health care, or should we pay 10 teachers? In other words, they're making these decisions for us. It's kind of a mixture of paternalism and elitism, but it's really got a eugenics base to it.
Yeah, because they're not even just saying, should we give them health care? They're saying, we're just going to let them die. We're not going to perform the surgery that we should. We're going to kill them, even if they don't have money, even if they have money. But we're not just talking about, hey, this group says, you know, that maybe they shouldn't breed. We're talking about going into ghettos, they would, and just sterilize people and just knock their doors down. I mean, that is forcible action. And what's amazing to me while we're highlighting it is that there's this neo-eugenics is a term that we're making up right now to describe this. They're going in and saying all across the board here that it's actually a good idea. And then we ask, what does pre-crime even mean? How do you determine that? Well, a conspiracy theorist is now, according to the Bible of psychiatric medicine, a mental illness.
Oh, yeah.
So
criticizing the government.
Well, hey.
Because if you criticize the government, you may actually, be a criminal. You may actually get upset and start shooting people or do something about it, violent.
Yeah, I mean, the TSA shooter, they say that anyone who's ever criticized the TSA is responsible for that. Anyone. So basically 99% of Americans are now evil and insane, so they should be sterilized. I mean, that's how that works.
Absolutely amazing. Well, we want to take your calls. That number is 800-259-9231. Give us a call if you disagree with us. If you think that there should be some control over the population, if you think that the people that you don't like should be taken out, let us know. We want to hear if you disagree with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex, and I'm joined here in studio with Anthony Gucciardi from Story League. And we were just talking about these Reddit comments people are making anonymously, talking about how they agree with eugenicism. And we've got the phones open for people who agree with that as well. We want to hear what they have to say. And actually, the phone lines are lighting up with people who agree with eugenics. Let's go to the very first one. James in New York. James, are you there?
How you doing?
Hey, do you think that Hitler gave eugenics a bad name?
I can't really speak on Hitler, but, I just want to bring a different perspective to the conversation, especially about abortion. I really do believe people should have the right to have the right to ability to have an abortion. Especially in these urban neighborhoods, every time you turn around, I just got out of high school. Every time you turn around, you see a 16-year-old girl pregnant, a 17-year-old girl pregnant, and you don't know, for many different reasons, for lack of family support, environment, mistakes, and when children are born into that environment, it's just not fair to the child.
Well, what do you think about North Carolina? They went into the ghettos and they forcibly sterilized specifically black women, and they said they were unfit to breed. Do you think that's a good idea?
No, I'm not saying that. But I do believe people should have the right to have an abortion, especially when you know that the child that you're going to be bringing into this situation, it's not going to be, the situation is not going to be right for the child.
Well, James, what about adoption? I've got 2 adopted children. I know a lot of people who want to adopt children, and it's not very easy. As a matter of fact, in North Carolina, we were forbidden, at the time we were looking to adopt, we were forbidden from adopting multiracial children. I know some friends now who have been able to do that. They adopted a sibling group. They're a white couple, and they adopted some black siblings. What about adoption? Isn't that an option for the children instead of killing them?
Adoption is an option, but then with adoption, you don't know who is going to end up with the kid. You got all this pedophilia going around. You don't know who's going to end up with your kid.
You don't know.
Of course, you have people. Who come out of adoption situations, jobs who he's
Sorry, your calls.
It's cutting up, but yeah. I think James agrees with abortion, which I think is part of eugenics, but I don't think he overall agrees with the whole concept of forced sterilizations and selective breeding.
Yeah, but abortion came out of eugenicist philosophy. And Margaret Sanger was very clear that she started abortion. It was targeted towards black families, and we've got a great documentary here, Maffa 21.
Ask James something. James, are you black?
Yes, I am.
Do you not think there's a direct assault on black people in regards to abortion? I mean, what is it, 40 million babies, predominantly black, killed? I mean, do you think it's a good idea, though? You're saying it's actually a good idea to go in.
It's a lot of direct assaults against black people. We go for days about that, But
so why do you support abortions? I mean, if anything, it is a bunch of rich white men going in and saying we need to kill black babies. I mean, how are you supporting that?
That's how Planned Parenthood started.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Margaret Sanger, I believe, was extremely racist. I mean, they would use the most racist terms I've ever heard in my life. And it amazes me that it's some issue of women's rights now. It's some issue of you're racist if you're against abortion when they're targeting predominantly black babies and black families.
As a matter of fact, there's a whole documentary that we sell here at Infowars called Mafia 21.
Yeah.
That was done by Mark Crutcher, the guy who discovered this abortionist in Houston who's killing live babies. It focuses entirely on the war against the black community as being the source of the abortion industry.
James, why have you let them break you down? Why do you not think they're capable of having a child? I mean, you're telling me that you believe that it's good that these black girls get abortions because they're not fit to have a child at age 16. Why aren't we talking about abortions in upscale, rich yacht communities? I mean, what's the difference? You're letting them win. You're letting them break you down, man. You have the power to take care of a family. You have all that power. You don't need the government to come in and run your life and kill your babies. Is it not an attack on you?
Had to come into the urban neighborhood. How about you? Do your life over and keep being born into that environment.
Well, that's this whole idea that children are bad. Children are not bad. Children are a gift.
No, not at all. Not at all. But if the mother is 16 years old, barely has an education, I think she should have a chance. Everybody makes mistakes. She should definitely have a chance to, have an abortion.
If you make that argument,
it's a lot of girls who are 16 and they raise their children and it comes out a good situation. But I know I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I see it.
I understand where you come from, James. We need to move on to another caller, but I just want to say this one thing.
Attack on the culture, period. There's an attack on the culture. This is a symptom. This is not the ultimate issue here. The symptom is the ghettos are by design implemented. The economy is by design collapsed, and there is an attack majorly on the black culture, period. And that's what's spawning all of this to the point now where people are in horrible situations that I actually know personally and are saying, well, we need an abortion because we can't support the child. This is a response. This is not, now the debate is, should we get an abortion? It should be, why is this even happening? Why is the culture being destroyed? We need to reclaim it.
It's also a slippery slope of saying that quality of life is the determining factor as to whether or not somebody should even have life.
And then what's a good quality of life?
Exactly. If we have somebody who has some kind of a physical challenge, do we then kill them because they don't really have as good a life as I would have? Let's say that they're in a wheelchair. Let's go to Dennis in Texas. Dennis, what do you think about this? Do you think we ought to sterilize 13-year-olds or something like that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've seen so many 13-year-olds having so many kids and the parents allowing that and making it available to be okay. And you need to weigh that out, okay? Now, if you lived in my community, you'd be so disgusted. I live in a rural community, okay? And you would not believe what I see that's a heartache every day. Now, I'm not saying, hey, let's kill them because they're retarded or they're mentally deficient. Let's make their lives extremely comfortable. Let's make them okay to live within their means. But fix them.
And you fix them by sterilizing them and taking away their right to produce and actually live and have a family. And who? I mean, are you for the just across the board sterilization of 13-year-olds without their permission?
Hey, if they got a problem that means that they're not going to be socially adept into the ability to live a normal life.
Well, who makes that?
What does that mean, though?
Yeah, who makes that determination, though? And once we set up some standards, what keeps those standards from sliding?
Well, let's look at this now. I saw this one little ad in some CNN thing where there's this lady in England, and she decided that she's going to marry some autistic guy, and she was looking forward to having children.
Dennis, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been depressed? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been depressed in your life?
No, I don't get depressed because I'm
You've never felt sad? You've never felt sad before and down, just kind of depressed?
No, I'm too busy.
Dennis, have you ever questioned the government?
Always, 24/7.
Dennis, you are a psychiatric patient. You are mentally ill. You are unfit to breed. I mean, going by this logic, the DSM, listen, the fifth iteration of the DSM, the Bible of psychiatric medicine, says if you're questioning the government constantly, you are mentally ill. So, Dennis, you are actually mentally ill.
Oppositional defiant disorder.
What we need to do is if you're mentally ill, then you're unfit to breed, because your children then could become mentally ill. I mean, genealogically, if you're questioning the government, it's very possible your children could question the government. Therefore, you are unfit to breed, Dennis. It doesn't matter about any of your other qualities. You are mentally ill. So do you understand now how this works? You are mentally ill and you are unfit to breed.
You're putting it on the upside down, because what you're trying to do to me is you're trying to make me take away from the reality of the situation to look at to where.
Well, no, the reality of the situation is that the psychiatric Bible says those who question the government are mentally ill. And you're in the same paradigm as someone who might have autism, or someone who might actually be suicidal or have schizophrenia. It's all the same distinction of mental illness. If you are depressed, you are mentally ill. If you have thoughts of aggression, which pharmaceutical drugs give you, you are mentally ill. And then you'll be given pharmaceutical drugs which give you more psychiatric symptoms, which make you further mentally ill. Therefore, 1 in 10 people now are having mainline mental illness. 50% of people in their lifetime will be taking drugs for that and are mentally, or will be perceived as mentally ill. And as every iteration of the DSM comes out, more and more people are considered crazy and mentally ill. So when we go and we say that these people mentally aren't fit to breed, 99% of everyone that's saying that can also be classified as unfit to breed. Do you see how that works? So when you start pushing the precedent that, yeah, maybe we should sterilize these certain types of people, anyone that's saying that, chances are, unless you're one of the 500 elite that are exempt from this, you're going to be sterilized as well. It doesn't matter. It's all the same class, and that's how Obamacare works as well. The whole system, the idea that these people that think you're crazy and want to kill you are going to give you health care for free and going to give you a system that enhances your health is a massive joke. But before we go, because we've got to move on, we somehow have so many people that support eugenics. Did Hitler give eugenics a bad name?
No, he didn't. Not at all. No, he didn't.
Okay. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Right.
All right, let's move on to the next one then.
Yeah, let's go to Andrew in Massachusetts. Andrew, are you there? Okay. Okay, let's go to Howie in Pennsylvania.
Hello.
Hey, Howie, what do you think about that? Did Hitler give eugenics a bad name?
Well, that's kind of a trick question, but I'm just going to skip over that and say I do think that sterilization should be implemented because, you know, anything can be good. It depends who's in charge of it. I think that we should be in charge of it and say that anybody that wrote a white paper about sterilizing people en masse, they should be sterilized.
Well, you know what, Howie, you're right. You're funny because I knew we would get at least, because here's the reality. I mean, any sane individual, like actually real awake individual, agrees that eugenics is a bad idea. I mean, across the board. I mean, agrees that, yeah, Hitler was not right. But apparently a small section of people actually do think, as we've seen from these comments, I mean, thousands of people upvoting it saying, yeah, Hitler gave eugenics a bad name. We should sterilize all 13-year-olds. But, I mean, the reality is anyone saying that should sterilize themselves. I mean, isn't that right, Howie? You think anyone saying that we should sterilize people and have abortions up to age 5, well, they should just do it themselves then. They should just kill themselves, huh?
Right, yeah, exactly. You first, buddy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, let's
thanks, Howie,
for some realism here, but let's talk to someone else who believes that Hitler is right.
Let's talk to Don in Connecticut. Now, Don, you said that you think because of the welfare state that we should have eugenics?
Well, they go together.
They go together?
Well, you're going to have half the people in this country on welfare, then what else are we going to do?
How about we abort the welfare state?
Well, I consider abortion to be justifiable homicide. I am pro-choice, definitely. But I do not believe in eugenics. No, it should be the individual who
justifiable.
Wait, yeah, let's probe that a little bit.
So if I were to go up to a pregnant woman and stab her in the stomach and kill her baby, should I go to jail?
Going to end up happening if people don't get the connection. If they don't get the connection between this unlimited welfare state, we have limited resources, and you all of a sudden you're going to let everybody who wants my money have it for whatever reason.
So you think we should just kill everyone on welfare?
But because they go together. And people need to connect that. They need to understand that if you're going to have a state that, you know, you get to claim my money. And
so we should just kill everyone who's on welfare. Listen, if Hitler said kill everyone on welfare, do you think that's a good idea?
So much money.
Now, explain to us why you would say that's homicide, but it's justifiable homicide, and do you put any limits on that as far as what age?
It is murder. I mean, I'm pro-choice, and I will admit it's murder, but it's justifiable homicide.
Up to what age would you?
My body. It's my choice.
Okay, but is it? What about the choice of the child that you're committing homicide on? What age would you take that to? Would you stop that at 3 months or 3 years, or at what point should we have justifiable homicide of children?
You know, every case is different.
Oh, wow.
Every woman there's all sorts of reasons why a woman might get an abortion too late, but it does. I mean, it should skeeve you out, definitely, because it's homicide. It should bother you. It shouldn't be the way it is now, people, using it for birth control.
Well, I certainly agree with that.
By the way, I should give people a heads up. I took somebody to Planned Parenthood for an abortion who swear that they did not mess up. They took their birth control pills. And I'm sitting there in the waiting room with probably 14 other women who also swear that they took their birth control pills. Somebody needs to investigate Planned Parenthood because that's the very source of the birth control pills these women had.
Well, let me ask you, since you say that you're okay with homicide, I mean, are you okay with what this Houston doctor is accused of, where the children are born alive and he twists the head off of the child? You're okay with that?
It's so disgusting. It's ridiculous.
So
I imagine that guy, that manifestation of sadism that's being, public like that.
So only some killing of babies is justifiable homicide, but other kind of killing of children is not that good, right?
No.
Okay. So basically, whatever doesn't emotionally hurt you as bad, that's okay. But if it emotionally hurts you, then that's not justifiable. So law should basically be written based on the emotions of its citizenry, and that offends me that baby was killed in that circumstance. But backyard McDonald's abortions that are now legal, that's okay. Those are fine. So. Well, thank you. We appreciate your call. We want to get to more people who are into eugenics, but the basic idea that it's justifiable in some cases and not so much in the other ones, it's just complete nonsense based on absolutely no foundation of anything. And that's what happens when you go away from reality. You go away from the Constitution. You go away from principles that we've followed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and you take it and you say, well, I feel this way about one thing and my emotions are over here on another one. It gets completely tossed up.
Well, they're not really different separate areas either.
No,
they overlap into each other because Margaret Sanger, who started abortion, talked about quality of life issues. She was also a eugenicist. She was a eugenicist. So abortion, eugenics, they all overlap with each other and they reinforce each other. Exactly. Obamacare is the way that it's going to happen, just as we saw Bill Gates talking about that. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking to Bill Still about the Federal Reserve. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're going to change gears radically here. We're going to go from talking about justifiable homicide, as this lady called abortions. I think we've got a lot of callers who are going to hold on the line to talk to us about this after we talk to Bill Still. But he's been very patiently waiting to talk to us about his film about the Federal Reserve. This is the 100th anniversary of the thing we call the Federal Reserve. And he has a wonderful documentary about that we sell at InfoWarsStore.com. It's Jekyll Island. And I've seen this documentary. I'm very anxious to talk to Bill about what he thinks the future holds and if there's any way to rein in the Federal Reserve. But we're going to talk about the effects that it's had and the history of the Federal Reserve. Bill Still has many films that you may have seen. He has The Secret of Oz. He is a former newspaper editor and publisher. He's written for USA Today, the Saturday Evening Post, LA Times, and Omni Magazine. Bill, are you there? Hello? Have we got Bill on the line? Hey.
I can hear you.
Hey, Bill, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I just saw your film, Jekyll Island, and it's really timely with the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve. I think it's really an amazing story that people need to see. They need to understand the history of how we got this. They need to understand the implications of this. As you pointed out, there's a couple of things that have really ruined country after country throughout history. That's a fractional reserve lending system and the debt that they impose on sovereign nations.
Yeah, really, the two major problems with the world economy and the economy of every nation are, number one, government borrowing, and number two, fractional reserve lending. They are two distinct forces, but the first problem that I would try to go fix is we don't need to just pay down the national debt. We need to eliminate the ability of the federal government to borrow, because the borrower, as the Bible says in Proverbs, the borrower becomes servant to the lender. And so therefore you have, instead of a republic or a democratic republic or a constitutional republic, you have nothing but a plutocracy that is ruled by the banking class. And this is what humanity has tried to escape for the last 2,000 years. And we're rapidly devolving now, back in the last 50 years, towards less freedom, towards more centralized control. And I'm not just talking about centralized control of government. I'm talking about centralized control by the debt-based banking system.
That's right.
And the reason most of us think that government is no longer responsive to we the people is because they are now completely responsive and subservient to those to whom they owe this debt, namely the largest commercial banks.
It's amazing in your film, Jekyll Island, you go back in quite a ways into history, especially back to the Napoleonic times, the Louisiana Purchase, and how the Rothschild family got in control of major countries in Europe. But then you take it forward to when the Federal Reserve was created. It's kind of interesting, this secret train ride on Senator Aldrich's private Pullman car that's black. I like the way the documentary starts out with that. This is something that was set up to stop the rapid, what they call the business cycle, the boom and bust cycles. And yet the Federal Reserve hasn't really worked out too well in terms of that, has it?
No, it hasn't. And in fact, just 16 years after the creation of the Federal Reserve, what did we have? We had the largest crash in U.S. history, leading to the deepest depression of the 20th century. So, and interestingly enough, there's this rumor going around that the Fed has.
Yeah, we're going to come back. Hang on, Bill. We're going to be right back right after the break. Stay tuned, you guys will hear the rest of the story. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex, and we've got on the phone with us documentary filmmaker Bill Still, who just completed the documentary film Jekyll Island. And Jekyll Island tells a story of the Federal Reserve and really kind of underscores the fact that the Federal Reserve is not federal and they don't really have any reserves. And it's something that was created to solve the problem of the business cycle, but it actually has made it quite bad, as Bill was just saying before we went to break. Bill, as they came in and set up the Federal Reserve, it was only just a few years after that we had the Great Depression, one of the largest depression, of course, the worst economic situation the world has seen worldwide.
Well, yeah, worldwide, but that was not the deepest depression in U.S. history. The years after the Civil War were actually the deepest depression if you look at it from a percentage of money disappearing from the U.S. economy. I think it was 84%. The money in the system was reduced by 84% during those 30 years. And this led up to the bankers caused a series of booms and busts to try to justify bringing a massive centralized system, the Federal Reserve System, and that's really how we got it. And as I was getting ready to say before the break, there's a rumor going around that the Fed has a 100-year charter, and that's going to come up here on December 23rd. That's just not the case.
Right.
Initially, it was given only a 20-year charter, and there's a reason in corporate rulemaking, because the Fed is a corporation. They did admit that when they changed changed the law in 1927. There's some rule in corporate America that you don't want a corporation to last over 20 years. So they made the Fed, they gave the Fed a 20-year charter, and then after only 13 years, they decided, well, we're going to jump in there and change it and make it indeterminate, as the law states. So in 1927, that was changed, and the Fed now has a perpetual charter.
So how do we get rid of the Fed?
Well, it's going to take tremendous public awareness, and I personally don't think it's going to happen until a lot more pain has been applied to the U.S. economy. Right now, we're in the mother of all bubbles with the stock market, and at some point, that's got to collapse. You just can't continue to expand the money supply logarithmically, and yet even now we see unemployment rates and money going to the middle class. The middle class economic experience is no better than flat, despite the fact that the Fed is pumping an unlimited, and not an unlimited, but an unprecedented amount of money into the system, over $1 trillion a year. This has never happened before in U.S. history, and still, it's for the middle class. There's really no change. In fact, our purchasing power is continuing to go down. All this money is being concentrated to an ever greater degree in the hands of the banking class, and there's just no way around that. That is not going to turn around. It's going to do nothing but not only increase but accelerate the rate of increase until the system collapses. And at that point, then we can finally have an opportunity for real change, because people will see that the solutions that have been offered in the past were lies, just as Mr. Obama's health care bill. So that's the problem. We're going to have some more pain.
And we've seen this in the past. We've seen the World Bank under Robert McNamara going in and getting third world nations totally inundated with national debt. And he was criticized, the World Bank was criticized for what they called rent-seeking status. In other words, getting these countries so far in debt that they could never get out of it. And that's what we see happening throughout history, as your documentary points out. The banks will get countries so far into debt that they can never get out. And that's why they talk about turning everybody into renters. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Bill, and I really appreciate that. That documentary is Jekyll Island, and as we approach the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve, find out about its true history. Find out that it's not really federal and there's no reserve. It's a private bank that is destroying our country financially. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex. Now, if you caught the show in the last segment, we were talking about eugenics with Anthony Gucciardi, a story leak, and we were asking people if they agreed with eugenics, if they agreed with the comment stream that we found on Reddit that said that Hitler gave eugenics a bad name. And so we've been taking some calls from people who wanted to defend eugenics or to defend abortion. We just had a lady say that she thought that abortion was justifiable homicide. We couldn't really pin her down as to how it was justified, but we've got some other people on the line who would like to talk to that I think support eugenics. We've got Kyle in Colorado. Kyle, what would you like to tell us about eugenics that you agree with?
Hello?
Hello, Kyle?
Yes.
You're on the air.
I think I know the argument they're sort of trying to make, the people who support eugenics. And it's the fact that we don't have enough food in our world. We don't have enough, resources, as they say. China, they go around and they only let the boys live. We have other cultures, though, who have had forced breeding. The Tahitians, they'd have to go have sex with their brothers and sisters before they could go out into the community.
Well, the argument that we don't have enough food and water for people to eat, that's something that was made by Malthus back in the 18th century, and that's something that's been proven over and over again to be wrong, because people don't just come into society as useless eaters. They actually produce things on their own. I mean, which ones of the kids do we get rid of? Do we get rid of the Teslas? Do we get rid of the Beethovens? Who do we get rid of? How do we know?
I don't believe I'm a father myself, and, children are our future. What we need to do is come together as humans and respect the fact that what we're doing and the arguments that people have are just illusions per se. I mean, I don't know. I can't agree with state-run breeding like what the Spartans did or the Tahitians did, but I mean, it has produced strong cultures over the centuries. I just believe that, you know, if you believe in, like, you know, murdering children and all that other stuff, you could just go to China because that's what they do there all the time.
Right, and we've seen how that plays out.
They're still doing it all over the world. So
That's right.
do we, like, argue that is it right, or do we argue on how we need to stop it now? Because it's still going on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we need to stop it. And we need to do something that's radical. As they asked Dan Savage, they said, come up with a radical, controversial idea to improve the planet. Well, I think maybe respecting people, individual liberty, individual dignity and freedom. You know, it was a radical idea for B.F. Skinner to say that he was going to take away people's freedom and dignity. And it was a radical idea when Jefferson said that you can't do that. You can destroy somebody's life and their freedom, but you cannot disjoin those two things. They're essential to our personhood. And if you let somebody do that to someone who is weaker, someone who fits some arbitrary criteria, it's going to come back around to you. But let's see if somebody else wants to defend this. We've got Patty in Arizona. Patty, how do you feel about eugenics, abortion?
I feel that no man has the right to make that decision for another human being, that is their God-given right to have children. I have a daughter who was diagnosed developmentally slow. She's now 25. But after she got married, several years later, she got pregnant. And from the time she was 9, they had been telling me the county would come to me, send their health people and say, don't you think you should have her fixed? You know, she should never have children. And it was like, no, this is her decision, you know. And I have 2 beautiful granddaughters. They did not allow her to keep them. They fought her tooth and nail because they decided that wasn't going to happen, that she would not be an adequate parent. And she finally, after a year and a half after the first one, just gave up because they just gave her so much trouble.
So the state came by and confiscated her children because of what? Because of her IQ? Or, I mean, were there specific instances that they cited? What did they do?
She was back in Minnesota, and they were telling her, oh, you're going to be a great little mom, and you're going to keep your baby. And I finally called back there and said, quit lying to my daughter, because I know you people. And you are going to take her baby the minute it's born. I said, you better go tell her the truth. So a week later, they went back there and told her the truth and said, the minute you have this child, we're going to let you hold it one time, and then we already have a home for it. And that they were letting her think that she was going to be this great little mom and keep her child. And I finally told her, okay, come to Arizona. And she came here, that they had given her, wrote up all kinds of actually false statements about her from Minnesota, and they just kept at her. They'd let her.
So it's kind of like a pre-crime thing, right? Based on who she was. I mean, if they're going to take the child at birth, then she hasn't at that point done anything to endanger the child.
No, absolutely, and they kept saying, well, anyway. She has 2 little daughters, and we've been very blessed that a foster mother has adopted both the children and has let her stay in their lives, and she gets to see them once a week. But she finally it wasn't going to matter what kind of hoops she jumped through. They were never going to let her keep those kids. But after she had her second child, she made the decision to get fixed. And that's what she wanted to do, and that was her choice. She was a grown woman. She was 24 years old, you know.
Right. And yeah, it was too heartbreaking for her to have her children taken away. Well, that's a sad story. Thank you for telling us that. We should always remember that every human life is precious. I know so many people who have had mentally handicapped children with Down syndrome. These are wonderful children if you love them. And any parent who has had a Down syndrome child will tell you that it really is kind of what you make out of it. You know, God gives us different situations in life, and they can be a wonderful situation, or if we come at it with a different attitude, and it's a very challenging situation. I'm not undermining how challenging this is, but I can tell you over and over again, parents that I know that have had children with health consequences or mental consequences, and it's been one of the biggest blessings of their life, they'll tell you. Let's talk to Kyle in Maryland. Kyle, what do you think about eugenics?
All right. Before I answer on whether or not I believe that Hitler gave eugenics a bad name, can I ask you, what would be your definition of eugenics then?
What would be my definition of eugenics?
Yeah.
Well, eugenics literally means to improve the gene pool. And typically when people do that, they have some criteria where they think that people that have particular characteristics, whether that is a racial characteristic or whether those are characteristics of their mental capacity or it might be their physical capacity, that those people should be, first of all, sterilized, in many cases put down. That's my understanding of eugenics. What's yours?
Okay, so what you're saying is you think that eugenics is basically the physical or mental manipulation of humans into getting almost like an elite race or, an elite humanity out of it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, tell us what your definition of it is.
Well, I would agree with you on that. Well, what I say is, yes, I would say Hitler did give eugenics a bad name. And I would say that because I believe eugenics can be used in a good way, i.e. through everybody getting the right nutrition, the right education, people not getting these vaccines, people not getting these genetically modified foods, people, not being subjected to this horrible, media, the music media, the entertainment, everything like that. It teaches people bad morals, bad values, and if people didn't have those types of
True, but I would say that eugenics is not that broadly construed to say that it's just generally improving the human condition, whether it's health or environment or educational exposure. I think eugenics is very, very particular in terms of selecting out, not only selecting what is good, but selecting what is good by eliminating what you perceive to be as bad.
Okay. And again, I agree with that. I mean, I perceive all these cancers, all these illnesses, all of them are bad. But through the type of eugenics, we can get rid of all these things. And, obviously I don't agree with forced sterilization, forced abortions, anything like that. Mm-hmm. And, everybody's saying, oh, you have the right. I don't want to hear anybody say that, oh, you have the right, you have the free will to choose to kill your child. Nobody should have that right or that choice to kill a child. That's never right. And I admire you when you just said that you have adopted children. There's so many good people out there that are out there to adopt children. And, like, for example, me and my wife, I got my wife pregnant when she was 18 years old. I'm 24 now. I had a son when I was 21. And I make $35,000 a year. She's a stay-at-home mom. We eat all organic. I don't want to hear people say that they, you can't get out of the system. You can't, making only a certain amount of money, you can only do so much, because I get by just fine and can save plenty of money.
That's right. Sometimes those challenges are what we need in life. And like I said before, many people that I know that have had children with health issues. I was just handed this paper from the Asperger's Association of New England, and they were talking about how that's simply a high-functioning form of autism. And we've had a lot of people that they believe have had Asperger's syndrome. Some of them, Jane Austen, Emily Dickinson, even Thomas Edison. They say, well, whether or not that's true, it's still a human life. People still have a right to their own life and their liberty. And we'll be right back taking more calls. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex. And we've been talking since the bottom of the hour, last hour. Anthony Gucciardi came on, and we were talking about this Reddit stream that he found where people said Hitler gave eugenics a bad name. Amazing comments, amazing things you see people say when they can get on the internet and talk anonymously, you find out what they really think. And we saw some pretty amazing, some pretty scary comments on there. One of them says, well, we don't think that it should be mandatory, but let's make it fashionable. Let's make it trendy. Let's encourage people. Let's make them feel like they're dressed poorly or they're awkward if they have too many children, let's say. We've got callers that we're taking their opinions on it. We've got Tom in Maryland. We got him at the top of the line because he agrees with eugenics, and we want to know why. He wants to explain why he does. Tom, why do you agree with eugenics?
Well, real quick, just to segue on your last comment, at the risk of being labeled a Nazi, I do understand from reading and from various sources that Hitler forbade the use of nuclear weapons that could affect his troops. Don't know if it's true or not, but it's certainly a contrast to what we're doing with depleted uranium.
Oh, absolutely. I would say that after Operation Paperclip, we had a lot of Nazi scientists who came to the United States. And those types of operations that they have been doing in concentration camps on POW prisoners, on concentration camp prisoners, they continued those types of experiments at Fort Detrick and other places, nuclear, biological, chemical experiments. Anthony was talking about the plutonium experiments that they conducted on people. So there's been a lot of experimentation here in the United States, and we need to come to grips with the idea that just because we're America, that doesn't make us the good guys. Our American government has done things just like the Nazis have done, in some cases worse, and we should not give our own government a pass. That's the kind of tribalistic thinking that divorces the actual facts, the actual things that people are doing, and kind of says, well, we're good guys because we're Americans, they're bad guys because they're Nazis. And it's the kind of thinking that keeps us from actually looking at the policies of Hitler and making those comparisons here in the United States and saying, look, we're making these same mistakes. We're heading down this same path. But go ahead. Tell us about what you think about eugenics.
That's for sure. But my point was, and maybe you can verify this through your sources, my point was that Hitler had a nuclear option and didn't use it. And I don't know what that says about him and his regime, which obviously was out of control. But I just wanted to make that point. On to the eugenics question, though, what your other caller said a few calls back, if I can try to defend him a little bit, I think what he was trying to say is that we do have an actual concern over overpopulation. Gluttony is not good in any situation, and we can see that in certain countries, and I don't think it's up to any individual man or woman to make a decision over these things.
We can go into, certainly we can go into an area that's got a very high population density like India, and we can say that the problems are the number of people that they have, but are they really the number of people that they have? Or is it maybe something that is like the kind of economic system that they live under, the kind of government that they live under? Could it be that if they had a different set of values there, if they had more liberty, more freedom, if they had a different kind of economic structure, perhaps it's the banks, perhaps it's central banks that are creating economic desperation there. You know, that happened in the United States, as we just talked about with the Federal Reserve. They created desperate conditions here in the United States because of fiscal policy. It wasn't because of the number of people that we had the Great Depression. It was because of banking policies. So when we look at that, it's not necessarily, you can't make the correlation that it's because we've got too many people.
I'm just making an observation. I think your views are going to meld with mine quite a bit. What I'm getting to is I think it's probably a combination of what you're saying, and I do think there are situations where, indeed, people are having too many kids that they simply can't care for. However, on the flip side of the coin, we have most governments, from my observations, luring people into entitlement and dependence as opposed to empowering them and educating them so that they can make sound and rational decisions.
Absolutely. That's been the goal of governments, and like I point out, it's not only just the communists and the socialists. They've taken it to a fine science. But it goes all the way back to Plato's time, where he wanted to destroy the family. Why? because he wanted them to be totally dependent upon the government. He wanted them to see the government as a source of everything. Be dependent upon the government, just as you pointed out, for everything, whether it's food or clothing. We'll be right back.
The empire's on the run. Alex Jones.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex, and we're not going to be talking about witches at Black Magic. We've already talked about that at abortion clinics. I've got Jakari Jackson joining me here. We got some breaking news here in Austin that we're going to talk about. I apologize to the people who've called in to talk about eugenics. We're going to move on to another topic now. We're going to flush those lines. But, you know, we had one of the callers who talked to us was really kind of, I think, confusing eugenics with just kind of improving the human condition and saying there are things that we can do to help people's health, things that are damaging us genetically in the environment. And he was absolutely right. One of the things that you can do for yourself to help you from chemicals that are damaging you in the environment is Survival Shield from InfoWarsStore.com. Actually, it's InfoWars Health. You can get that. We just got a shipment of that in. That helps to protect you from the harmful chemicals that are so prevalent in our environment now. And it is one way that you can help yourself and help your family. It's not necessarily going to turn you into the super race or some kind of a eugenics thing, but it will improve your health. It will make you feel much better, and it will protect you against many of these harmful effects that are present every day in what you get. That's Survival Shield from InfoWarsHealth.com. InfoWarsLife.com, yes. And we got Jakari Jackson now. Jakari, you got some information about something that's happening here in Austin. Now, it's happening in Austin, but this is something that's happening all over the country, as we just learned earlier this week. Right. Tell us what's going on here.
Now, I was looking at the local news today, and, you know, we have a lot of events here in Austin. It's a very happening city. We have the UT football games. We have the Formula One racetrack concerts, South by Southwest, all kinds of things. So they brought in the police chief from Boston to talk to Acevedo and Police Chief Art Acevedo here in the city of Austin to talk about terrorism preparedness and things that we could do to prepare. And I have this clip queued up, and I want to play this clip and get you a comment on it.
Yeah, let's go there. Go ahead and play that clip, guys.
To put more eyes on the street, APD is also relying heavily on technology. They have a public safety camera system that continues to grow, helping them solve crimes within minutes.
We know that there's a tremendous number of cameras in the private sector, and right now we're working to try to get those private cameras in public places tied into our system so we can use those non-governmental cameras.
To put more eyes on the street, APD is also relying heavily on
use, which means that if you have, let's say you have a restaurant on 6th Street, the very happening street here in Austin, they want to be able to tap into those cameras. Now, obviously, if we had a situation like a Boston bombing or, you know, somebody mugged in the back alley, you know, hopefully the business owner would provide the information to the police. But to say that we want to be able to tap into your video feed anytime we choose to, that's a very unsettling thing.
We've seen it happen over and over again where there's an incident like 9/11 or a shooting, and they come in and they take the recordings, they confiscate the recordings from the private companies, and we never see them again.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened when you said with 9/11 with the Pentagon.
Yeah.
You know, with all the cameras around the Pentagon, and they came to the various hotels and gas stations and what have you, and confiscated those tapes. They've not seen the light of day, and then they show you this these few still images of the object striking the Pentagon.
That's right. And when they've got cameras themselves spaced every few feet all the way around the perimeter of the Pentagon from every different angle, and then they never showed us any of those. They confiscated the private cameras, and so now they're doing this. But I think there's something else going on here too, and that is, it was just a couple of days ago, and this was linked on Drudge, how malls are preparing to keep shoppers safe this holiday season by sending their camera feeds directly to the police departments.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to understand that, even implicitly, they're understanding that the next place we're going to see violence is the malls, because the TSA wants to continue to metastasize throughout society with these unconstitutional searches that they're doing.
Oh, exactly. And you always see these movies, these futuristic video games and so forth. And my question is, in my mind, you know, how do they get so much surveillance? How do the people stand idly by and allow the police and the police state to place all these cameras everywhere. Because, you know, they have the traffic cams and, you know, other places.
Yeah.
But, you know, how do they get pretty much a 360 view of the city? And it's things like this. And it sounds good at the first. You know, you may catch a mug, you may catch, you know, a bank robber or two, but you're also giving up your privacy.
Yeah.
Now the city of Austin, and which goes into a larger feed, I'm sure, can tap in and just watch you doing mundane activities, which could be mundane. It could be damning to you if you're doing if you're one of these thought criminals. If you have on the wrong Halloween costume.
Well, going back to what happens when there is an incident, take the LA shooting for example.
Right.
At the airport, we had all kinds of conflicting stories about what the shooter looked like.
Mm-hmm.
First eyewitness reports that came out, and the first reports from law enforcement were that he was wearing a blue TSA uniform.
Right.
We heard that he was a heavy-set man, and the guy who was saying this said he's much heavier than me, and that guy was fairly heavy. And then everything switches, and we see that, no, he was actually wearing a camouflage uniform. No, he was actually a thin 23-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
We hear different descriptions of the gun that's being used.
Right.
Early witnesses, eyewitness reports said that the first shots were made by this guy wearing a blue uniform with a pump shotgun,
mm-hmm.
and then he switched to a pistol. Then when the official story comes out, it's now an AR-15, which is the
big difference to go between a shotgun to a pistol to an AR-15.
Well, that's the gun that they want to demonize all the time, right? It's the quote-unquote assault rifle. And yet, talking about these cameras, have we seen anything to back up this radical change of narrative? This is why people don't believe the government's official stories.
Mm-hmm.
That and the fact that the timing is so suspicious as to why they would do this.
Yes, and I also want to talk more about drills, David, because you talked about the LAX shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk just for a second about the drill that was going on, because we saw the police chief come out and said, yeah, we were running this exact same drill 2 or 3 weeks ago. And, you know, the two guys in the back, you know, they're doing this, they're doing this. And like, oh, man, he shouldn't have said that. And you know, we see these drills happening all the time. We don't just see them here. We see them at Oklahoma City and other places.
Yes.
And as well-meaning as these police may be, I'm not saying that everybody's in on, you know, whatever may have gone on. But as well-meaning as they may be, even with these drills, they cannot protect you all the time. And I think that's something that people need to take away from these situations, because I just did a story last night on the nightly news about a woman who had multiple complaints against her ex-boyfriend. And he said, you know, please come help me. State troopers come and help me. And they said they were, quote, too busy to respond to her incident. We also see the situations up in Detroit. The police say, come here at your own risk. We cannot protect you. But back to the drills, we saw the police chief at LAX say that they were running the same drill. And it is very unsettling to me and also to other people, because we see these all the time with these, following these mass shootings, or before, or even simultaneous with these mass shootings and bombings and so forth.
It gives them away, and they're doing so many drills now that they're kind of covering it up that way. But we've seen over and over again, like you said, the exact same scenario, at exactly the same time, at exactly the same place. And when they're doing a false flag, what that allows them to do is, if they're caught, they can say it's simply a drill.
Mm-hmm.
It also means that those first responders who are not in on what's happening think that it's part of the drill. So they back off and they don't respond as quickly. And so that's what we're concerned about. When we see a drill, the first thing we look at, we see a drill, we see all kinds of descriptions of what's happening there that are conflicting radically. We see the story radically changing. We see no footage of what actually happened, just like in Boston. We never saw the footage of the brothers, except the fact that they were walking around the corner of a building with backpacks on. We never saw the footage of them actually setting bags down, as we were told by the governor. And then when they questioned him further on it, he said, well, I actually didn't see the footage. It was described to me by the FBI. So even the governor had not been shown this footage, even though they've got cameras everywhere, even though they're tapping in now to private cameras, we're still not allowed to see this. And we're supposed to credulously believe everything that the government tells us. And if they change the story 180 degrees tomorrow, we're supposed to just say, oh, well, that's the new reality, and forget what they told us the very day before.
Exactly. But you brought up Boston, and remember the drill, the University of Mobile coach, I believe it was, the track coach. So yeah, you know, when the thing was going on, they said, don't worry, this is just a drill. You know, and then they said, I believe it was the Boston Globe reported that they were having a bomb explosion or a mock bomb explosion, something along those lines. At the same time, you know, it's all these drills going on. Dan Badani's up there asking questions, are there drills? I say, no, they're not drills. Well, the Boston Globe reported it. We have eyewitness accounts of it, or ear witness accounts of it, people hearing it. But that doesn't mean anything.
But it's still the issue that the TSA, as we know, can't protect anybody. Security experts have been telling us all along that everything that's going on in the airports, and you know it if you've been there, you know that there's nothing that they're doing that is effective. We know
even in LAX, one of their own employees, one of the contractors, run around throwing ice bombs, scaring people. I mean, they're terrorizing themselves.
That's right. But the guy who created it, the congressman from Florida, said that he wanted to get rid of his bastard child because their success rate was so low when they sent trial people through with bombs or with guns that they were not interjecting, they were not catching those things. And so he said it's totally ineffective. And everybody knows that it's not effective. John Corbett, who filed this lawsuit against the TSA, he pointed out in the lawsuit that what they have done with these new procedures, these invasive procedures, the naked body scanners, the invasive pat-downs that violate our Fourth Amendment protection, violate our dignity, our freedom. So what they've done is they've created massive lines at the entrance to the airport. So you've got a mass of people just standing around like targets.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody can walk up there that hasn't gone through screening and just start massively killing people because, especially in California, it's pretty much a gun-free zone throughout the state. But certainly at the airports. But in those airports, they know that nobody's going to be armed. And so they can basically kill the people that are waiting to go through these invasive procedures. I think it's also very important to realize that John Corbett's lawsuit was published by the government on pacer.gov. They published they published an unredacted version of his lawsuit. He was able, through discovery, to look at their documents and see that they knew that there was no threat against airplanes or airports. And they have known this for a long time. Exactly. They've known this for a long time. They do not want people to realize that we're being harassed at the airports because when there's no threat against us. They didn't want that to come out. They desperately needed a threat. And we know that they're aware of this because when he came on the show, he's been on the show with, I interviewed him, Alex has interviewed him a couple of times. We've done articles about the lawsuit because it was very interesting. Pacer.gov is the place where all the federal lawsuits are posted, and the government mistakenly posted the unredacted version. So we can see what the TSA doesn't want us to know. The TSA does not want us to know that there is no threat that they're protecting us from. And when they did that, they took it down.
In the first place, you know, people slide through all the time with drugs and whatever else, and it's a very arbitrary thing. Where sometimes, you know, you don't even go through the naked body scanner. They may have you go through the through just a pat down or something else. And I don't like the pat down either.
Yeah,
you know, a pat down agent isn't going to catch something that could be seen on an X-ray scanner.
And John Corbett had produced a video. He's quite an activist on the TSA. He had produced a video. We got somebody here.
Now, listen, it's torturing me seeing that newscast. We can do this on the nightly news or something. We can look it up. On that whole camera deal, that started in Homeland Security about 10 years ago in New York, D.C., and Boston. That's why they're here. That's really an NSA Homeland Security deal. And then they're trying to make it the law that if you're a business, you've got to wire through, you get insurance discounts, including cameras inside. And I remember when they first put these cameras in 20 years ago, oh, it's never for surveillance, it's for traffic. So the whole point is the government staging the terror attacks.
Right.
So, I mean, I just saw you guys talking about it. And, you know, for me, that's really the big point here, is that we need to understand that Arte Ceveda is definitely on the tip of the spear right into Texas with the feds to bring in these control grids. That you can believe if, just like the Boston bombing, they had thousands of cameras and then they cover up all the contractors and the backpacks and the Saudis and the dead bodies. And, I mean, they staged it.
Right.
Okay. And the Boston police covered it up. Our reporter was there. They came in, the Secret Service said, shut up, don't ask questions, FBI. And the government did that, period. It's a false flag, just like Gladio. It's on record. We proved it. And they can, you know, we know what they've done. So getting back to the TSA, we got that contest going, $10,000 to do a video on the TSA and NSA, since they're trying to go after folks saying you can't criticize them. We need to have folks go to the YouTube channel. It's the featured deal, and watch that and get it out to folks and have all the filmmakers do this, because when they try to censor free speech, we redouble down. Sorry to interrupt you guys.
That's right. January 7th.
I don't mean to be like sitting here like Igor sitting on his shoulder. I got to get in the microphone here. But anyways, folks, it's time to get angry and stand up to these people. They're trying to take over right now.
That's right. One of the things that they hate is to be made fun of. And this is your perfect opportunity. And you can take satisfaction in that. Plus, you can also win $10,000. And that date is
a great way to start off the year.
January the 7th, I think it is.
The deadline.
Yeah.
You can go to Infowars.com and get the full contest rules. We always stress to people, follow the contest rules. David, you've judged a contest. I've judged a contest.
That's right.
And a lot of the problems we have is people that don't follow the rules. So make sure you follow all the rules, get it in on time, the proper length. There's rules like no profanity and so forth, so make sure you follow those guidelines.
It's a way to really get under their skin. They hate that. They knew what was going on with the John Corbett lawsuit as well. As soon as we had him on, they put a gag order on him and said, you can't talk about that. So he could talk about the fact that he had been gagged and his First Amendment rights had been shut up, but the stuff is out there. It's in public domain now. The fact that he quoted these documents from the TSA internally saying that terrorists were simply working on fundraising, recruiting, and propagandizing, and that's exactly what we see the TSA doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're recruiting, fundraising, and propagandizing us.
The terrorists have won because
absolutely.
Agenda is to change our way of life. Whoever the terrorist may be, and may not always be Al-Qaeda. You know, whoever the terrorist is, their goal is to change our way of life. And now we have to. They laugh. I bet they watch these reports and laugh. Aha! You get felt up at the airport. You get naked body scanned. They're tapping into your private security feeds. They're tapping into your phone. They're doing all this. They've won.
That's right. And we see the metastasizing security state, as Alex pointed out, having these cameras everywhere and feeding them back to the government, to their fusion centers so that they can watch us. It's an absolute total surveillance state. Mm-hmm. It's everything in your digital life, everything in your physical life. They want to track your cars. They want to know how much you've driven, where you've driven, when you've driven. They want to tax you, and they want to control you.
Oh, yeah, they want to control your internet searches.
That's right.
All of that.
Yeah.
Now, David, I have some more news. When we're talking about these drills at LAX, and I just want to bring people's attention. I've gotten some emails and some things on the tip share telling us about drills that are going on this very weekend here in the state of Texas. Now, these are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and from what I understand, it's multiple drills at multiple locations. So I don't know all the details on it. And here's one. If we can pull up that article from the Arlington Voice. Amid opposition, council approves Urban Shield exercise. Now, Urban Shield also did a drill in Boston before the Boston bombing, and we saw how effective that was at actually stopping a terrorist event.
They just had an Urban Shield in California towards the end of October, too.
Yes. So, I mean, these things are... And
then we had a shooting in L.A. Yeah. It wasn't in exactly the same area, but it's kind of interesting.
It's similar things. Now, if you look, the article says, Urban Shield is described as a full-scale exercise meant to test North Texas's ability to respond to simultaneous terrorist attacks in emergency scenarios. And I know we're going to break, so we can talk a little bit more about this on the other side.
That's right. We'll be right back. I'm here in studio with Jakari Jackson, and we're talking about the burgeoning, metastasizing police state. Cameras everywhere and drills constantly being conducted against you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex, and I'm joined here in studio with Jakari Jackson. And we've just been talking about the traveling road show that the government has, training for economic collapse or shutting off all of the food stamps or crashing the dollar or whatever. It seems like everything the government is doing domestically is gearing up for this impending crash. And now we've got Operation Urban Shield coming to Dallas, don't we?
That's exactly right, David. Now, Urban Shield's going to be taking place in Dallas this weekend in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's not just Dallas, but also Fort Worth and the surrounding towns. So there will be over 50 first responder teams, 50 teams, not 50 individuals, but 50 teams in 14 host sites. Now, you can go to...
Training to take you out.
Yes, if you go to...
Training to keep you under their thumb.
North Central Texas Council of Governments. That's the North Central Texas Council of Governments. You can go and get a list of some of their activities. And we want our Infowars to go out and film these. Don't stand in the street blocking the event or whatever, but just stand on the sidelines, get the best view you can, put it on YouTube and send it to us, because people always ask, how can I get involved? Right. How can I help? Just go film these things, send them to us, and we'll put it up on Infowars.com.
Absolutely. Now, Obama was just in Dallas defending Obamacare, and we've got this clip from it. Let's take a look at what he was just yesterday. He was in Dallas, so let's take a look at what he had to say.
If you've got health care already, then you can keep your plan if you are satisfied with it. If you like the plan you have, you can keep it. I intend to keep this promise. If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. If you like your plan and your doctor, you can keep them. You'll be able to keep your health care plan. If you like your plan, you keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you like your plan, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan. You like your current insurance, you keep that insurance. Period. One of the things that sometimes gets me a little
here he is in Dallas yesterday.
Although I understand it because I'm in politics, is folks who are complaining about how the website's not working. The first month I've not been happy with. You've all heard about the website woes. Nothing drives me more crazy than the fact that right now there's great insurance to be had out there, choice and competition, where people can save money for a better product, except too many folks haven't been able to get through the website. Now, this is like having a really good product in a store and the cash registers don't work and there aren't enough parking spots and nobody can get through the door. And so
that's
we
a defense.
are working overtime to get this fixed.
Now, as you recall, David, we had John McAfee of McAfee Antivirus Software here in studio, and he said he was asked to participate in the Obamacare website. He said flat out that site is not designed to work. Mike Adams said the same thing.
It's amazing to hear him defend this, because what he is doing is he's saying, you know, there's great insurance to be had out there, but we've created this massive bottleneck that you can't get to it. So it's still a great plan, but you just can't get to it because we created a bottleneck. The government does that everywhere. They do it whenever there's a major disaster and FEMA comes in, they create a bottleneck. They keep private individuals, churches, charities from being able to deliver stuff to people who need it. They always create this bottleneck, and that's all this website, that's all Obamacare is. But, you know, I mentioned at the beginning of the program, what we're getting now are the unelection returns. You know, it's not just the election that was Tuesday, but we're finding out that you got 900,000 people kicked out of their plans that they wanted, plans that they chose, plans that they thought were good, plans that, in fact, were better because they had deductibles that were anywhere from 2 to 5 times cheaper. Yes. They had insurance monthly payments that were 2 to 5 times cheaper as well. We see another 250,000 people unelected from their choices in California and Colorado. So it's going on everywhere.
Oh, definitely. So this is what you wanted. If this is what you wanted with the Obamacare, now you have it.
Great defense. Yeah, it's a great product. You just can't get to it because of his poorly designed, untested, unfinished website. Well, that's it for today. Alex will be back tomorrow. Join us then.
Infowars Nightly News tonight.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium